negotiating table, Sage. This is what it's called.
Yes.
So let's ramp it up, Jonathan. Some NFL Films music, because everything needs NFL Films music. So here's what we got. 4 free agents. 3 of them are on the defensive side and 1 on the offensive side. I picked these so I could pick a lot more as we go along and make this a bit that we could do on a regular basis as we lead up to free agency. So here are the free agents. Chris Harris, Brandon Scherff, Jadeveon Clowney, and Trey Waynes are the 4 that we will debate. Sage, I want you to pick 2 of those that you want to argue for, and I will argue for the other 2.
I feel like with this music in the background, I have to have something pre-planned and exciting. And we're going with Brandon Scherff. I think his name's Scherff over at the University of Iowa.
Scherff?
I believe it's Scherff over at Iowa. Brandon Scherff. We're going to go with him. We're getting an offensive lineman. This guy can pass protect. He's had a lot of green seasons for PFF, which means he has blocked well consistently in his career. We're going to go with him. And the other side of the ball, Jadeveon Clowney. We're talking about turnovers. Got to get more turnovers on defense. Clowney was destroying people at the end of the season. He was playing good until he got hurt there at the end of the year. But that guy, that the Vikings need a premier pass rusher. I'm taking some of those Emerson Griffin dollars. I'm giving it to Clowney. Clowney and Scherff, we're going to bolster the line.
Okay, let me argue against both of those guys then, and then you can have your counterpoint, and then I'll make my cases for Chris Harris and Trey Waynes. With Scherff, his name is extremely hard to figure out how it's supposed to be pronounced. That is a clear negative against him. But other than that issue, aging offensive linemen and how much you have to pay them is always really scary. A couple of years ago, our friend who is now on the show, Alex Boone, they gave him a ton of cash, and he had been great for the San Francisco 49ers. He was all-pro. He was a starting left guard in the Super Bowl, and when he got here, it was toward the end of his career. It's much, much more difficult to be great into your 30s as an offensive lineman than some other positions, and it's scary to pay them because if they fall off the side of the cliff, then you are on for a ton of money. So there would be my concern. It's not so much was he a good player, but how long is he going to be a great player? Jadeveon Clowney is just going to ask for way too much money. He's good, but I don't think he's ever quite lived up to that player who can consistently week in and week out change the game, where he certainly was in that game against Seattle. And if he wins you one, that's fantastic. But he's just been effective. But I also think there's a lot of great edge rushers who are coming up, whether they're in the draft or free agency, that you could fill a spot without paying one player $20 million.
Well, there you have it.
Okay. Do you want to respond to that, or do you want to let Jonathan decide who made the better case?
Jonathan, go ahead.
Okay.
I'm going with Coller here. I don't know that I want to pay an aging offensive lineman that much money, and I don't know that I want to pay Jadeveon Clowney that much money when I have Danielle Hunter on one side, and then I can just get production from Zimmer's coaching on the other side.
Sorry, Sage. You're going to have to work on this. All right. Now,
production from Zimmer's coaching. Just
well, that's what's going to happen probably, is that they're going to have to take some guys who maybe aren't big-time stars or highly paid and make them good. All right. Now, I'm going to argue for Chris Harris and Trey Waynes, and then you get to argue against it.
Sure.
Chris Harris, nickel corner, is the best of the best at that position, and it's really important for Zimmer's defense to have a great nickel corner. When that position has been average, I think it's hurt them, and he's been one of the best in the NFL for the Broncos for a very long time. You plug him in, and immediately your cornerbacks and your defensive backs are much, much better, and I think that you have to pass and stop the pass in the NFL, so start with him. Trey Waynes is an average corner, but you know what? Average is good. Average means something. And if he costs less than the top guys to bring him back and they can work his salary cap number around so it's not outrageous, they move on from Xavier Rhodes, then you know what you have, and you know this guy knows the Mike Zimmer defense and system. He could step back in and be a solid average corner. It makes sense to bring him back. There's my case. Now you argue against it.
So here's my against it. All right, Chris Harris is a slot corner. All right, the Vikings got destroyed on the outside last year, in particular Xavier Rhodes. They need outside players, not inside guys. All right, now on Trey Waynes, if you pay in free agency, you overpay for free agents. That's the way
I'm not supposed to say you're wrong.
Yes, you will overpay for now you're going to overpay for what you just admitted to an average player. That's not what you want.
Yeah.
You want to underpay for a good player, a diamond in the rough, somebody like that, or somebody that has consistently been very good. It's sort of okay to sort of overpay for that because you know what? We got a dominant player. So you're going to overpay for an average player, and you're going to get a slot core when you need an outside guy.
Jonathan, what do you think of those two arguments? I think I screwed mine up with Trey Waynes by saying when Sage was making good points.
I'm going with Sage here. I don't want to sign either of these two guys. I want to rely, like I said in the first one, I want to rely on Zimmer's coaching ability to coach guys up at that position that he's generally lauded for being a really good defensive back coach.
Yeah, and the price on corners is going to be high, but that goes for any of these positions. That if they're going to make that cap space by moving on from Everson Griffin, Linval Joseph, Xavier Rhodes, guys that have been around for a while, then are you going to spend to replace it, or are you going to spend on the offensive side with someone like Brandon Scherff or
Sure. This might be one of those situations where the Vikings, in reality, actually just wait out and don't go after. That they're. I don't know what their salary cap number is, but it's pretty high, I believe. By the way, Jacksonville. People should do a little study on Jacksonville's salary cap situation. It's like the worst in the league. They don't have a franchise quarterback. They let their best player go last year because they weren't going to sign him. Somebody else's, a couple of other guys are like free agents, and they still are way over the cap. I mean, that team is very much a mess. But maybe the Vikings wait for 2 weeks or 3 weeks and give it a little time. Then you go sign a couple guys for less money that they just really really like that weren't offered by anybody else.
Kind of goes to my theory that teams usually get one or two shots at it and then make a bunch of mistakes because of it. So the Jaguars believed in Blake Bortles because defense and just the randomness got them to the AFC Championship game, and they signed on for another year of Bortles. It screwed up their trajectory because they still had a good defense in 2018, but then after 2 or 3 years, as we're seeing here in Minnesota, the defense starts to crumble a bit. It's very hard to keep together 11 players who are really good. And then they got desperate at quarterback. They overpay for Nick Foles, and here you are. And with Doug Marrone in charge, you just hate to see it. Sage, Darius Slay is being reported to be on the trade market. Now, if you're Detroit, you're probably not super into the idea of sending Darius Slay to Minnesota and playing him twice when he's really good. But in terms of overpaying for stuff, would it be interesting to call the Lions and see what they're looking for Darius Slay?
Yeah, I mean, if you're going to overpay for a corner, you want to overpay for like the best one or one of the best ones that's possibly out there. He's got 1 year left on his deal, $10 million, and then he's looking for a monster payday. So it's not even just the trade. You have to give him, just huge salary cap dollars. And that's just, it's just really tough to do, to give up two things, both a draft pick or a player and big salary cap dollars. And so, but that's not a bad way to go if you're Detroit, to try to get some sort of compensation for him, going, you know what, in the long term, we just don't want to pay him that much money because of whatever, and to try to get something for him now. So teams are looking for corners. The question is, will they put up those big dollars? The Rams, by the way, I'm still super interested what they do with that, with that whole situation of trying to get, what's his name again? The corner that was traded there last year for two
Jalen
first-rounders. Jalen Ramsey. Like, what's going to happen? How are they going to get him signed to some sort of deal when they've already given up 2 first-round draft picks for him? He's probably going to ask for $22 million a year, something like that. And Slay may ask for the same thing over the course of the next year.
So the reason that I was intrigued by the Jalen Ramsey idea last year is because I looked at it as the end of a run a little bit for Mike Zimmer and the end of the defense being together. Everybody who was on the team this year starting in the playoff game was on the team in 2015. You just don't see that very often. And next year could be quite a bit different with these salary cap situations. And it's hard to see them being a contender unless they go all in for 2020 and go crazy and potentially screw up their salary cap from down the road by signing the players that we were just negotiating over, which Jonathan hated all of them. And I don't even blame you, Jonathan, for hating all of them. It is difficult to make a great case to overpay guys, either crazy bananas money like Jadeveon Clowney or older players like Harris and Scherff. It just doesn't work out that often for you. You're taking big risks, but I looked at last year as you've got a shot at this. So you should take it because it doesn't get any easier from here. And I guess I wonder, Sage, if you think that going all in for 2020 would make sense to take one more big shot at it, or if they started to look down the road a little bit and say, we have to restock this cupboard. So even though we want to be good in 2020, we might have to actually look at 2021 as a year to be back in real contention for a Super Bowl.
I think that they know they need to draft well. I think, and I don't think they need to go all in now. I just don't think they have the quarterback to go all in now and say we've got this great window. They have salary cap issues already. They would have to re-sign not only add more players, but you probably re-sign the current guys to extensions just to get like their salary cap extended out or something like that. And I don't, the Steelers did that forever and ever and ever but they had this expensive quarterback with Roethlisberger. So I don't like kicking the can down the road type of budget, management or whatever from Rob Brzezinski's job. I just have seen the organizations that do that, like Washington was always doing that, but those teams that do that seem to consistently lose, and you're behind the 8 ball, then you're sort of playing with the cards stacked against you. So I would, prefer that the Vikings go, we'll see what they can do this year, but they at some point may have to go like, we need to cut some guys and sort of start over and get some younger guys experience. And that's why this draft and the upcoming drafts are so important for them, because they do need to rebuild. They're going to have to rebuild this defense at some point, player by player, over the course of the next 2 or 3 or 4 years.
And that's why I'm really interested when we go to the Combine to hear what the buzz is and to talk with Mike Zimmer and Rick Spielman again, because oftentimes we get at least a sense of where their heads are at. And I want to get that feeling of, are you guys going to do something bold? Are you guys going to kind of stay status quo and look toward the future? Are you going to go crazy in the free agent market with whatever cap space you can create when there's a lot of other teams that are going to be pumping up the prices? So what is the plan? I think we'll have a feeling for it by next week. We won't know for sure because they're never going to tell us for sure, but at least have somewhat of a sense if they feel like, yeah, we're going to have to restock or we're going to try to bring all these